Okay, we are going to look at how to incorporate textures into our scene. If you are following along, we did a cereal box in class. I'm going to go ahead and select this surface here inside our corridor and create a box on top of it. Before I do that, I'm going to make this surface live so that it will create the box right on top, and I'm going to create a roughly cereal box shaped box. So it's a little on the thin side, but it's going to work for what we're doing. So yeah, we made that live. You might note that with lighting on, it may be kind of difficult to see things, and of course it's rendering it out in extremely low fidelity, but that's okay. We don't really need it to be super high fidelity, but alas, there it is. I'm going to actually turn it off for right now so that we can kind of see what we're doing. This is a standard box, and it needs a material applied to it. It's going to need a new material applied to it. And so I'm going to right click here, and I'm going to go ahead and add a new material, assign a new material. The material I'm going to use is just a standard Lambert. You might consider Phong or Blinn if you wanted a shinier result, but we're just going to be using an image to do our material map here, and so it doesn't really matter for what we're doing. Okay, so when we do this, we now have this new material. We're going to call it cereal material, cereal underscore material, and there it is. It's called cereal material. The first step to getting a material applied to an object is we're going to click on color and the checkered box next to it, and we're going to pick file. That's what we're going to use. There's lots of different things you could choose from here that we'll go over a few of these later in class. I'm going to click on file, and now it queues up this, which is file 1. It's called file 1. There's a folder right here, an unassuming little button where all the magic happens. This is what allows us to select our file that we're going to link to, and that's important because wherever it is we need to, this Maya file would need access to the location of that, and so mine happens to be in shared course files under I think we have it under materials, and I've got like a Fruit Loops box here, I've got a Lucky Charms box here. I'm just going to go ahead and use a Fruit Loops box and apply it. So I'm going to say open. Nothing happened because, well, actually something did happen. I'm going to turn off shadows just because I remember to do it right there, because it doesn't need to be on with lights, shadows. We don't need either one of those on. We do need on is this, textured. And now you can see that the texture, this material map has this image associated with it, and it is applied to this object right here. Okay? Which looks completely wrong because it is wrong. And the way we're going to fix that is we're going to go into UV editing, and we're just going to click on this box right here, which is the UV editor. Okay, and the UV editor shows us how this box is being applied to each face of this object. Okay, so if I click on face here, I can move the face around, and what that's actually doing, and we'll go ahead and pick a face we can see, which is this one, is it's going to change the way in which that face uses this two-dimensional image to project onto the face itself. This configuration for what we're doing is the worst. It's not ideal. It's actually taking this rectangular prism and creating sort of this cube-like interpretation of it, because that was the initial UV configuration that was applied to it. So I'm going to go out here to object mode, and with UV editor open here, I can kind of see what I'm doing. I'm going to cycle through a couple different options. If you look down below, you can see that this is planar mapping. That's what happens when you do planar mapping. You can do this, which is cylindrical and spherical, and none of these are actually going to help us get what we want. We're going to click on this one, which is automatic mapping. Okay. Automatic mapping under normal circumstances, when applied to a rectangular prism, which is what we just did, is going to give us the ability to select each individual face and move it around. So if this, for example, was supposed to be the front face of the cereal, I could use the same keys, Q, W, E, R, and you can see that they're being used. W, E, R, W for move. I can move this into position, right? and where it belongs. What I like to do is get the ones that don't belong there out of the way. Now, of note, if you have soft selection on B, if I turn on soft selection, this makes a huge mess of trying to do this work. And I didn't actually realize this until I accidentally had it on, and I noticed that the vertices, or the UV verts, were yellow. What's going to happen here is it's going to move the whole thing all over the place depending on how big your soft selection is. It doesn't really matter. In this case, we do not want soft selection on at all. So double check that you tap the B key. Otherwise, if you go in here, for example, and you just want to move a vertex around, you know, when you move the vertex around, it's going to move whatever vertex is associated with it. But if you want to move a face around, we're no longer in a situation where we have to worry about it moving things around. So I think some students were actually moving edges. If you move an edge, that's going to do that. We're not moving edges, we are moving faces. Okay. You can also click on UV shell, and that gets you essentially the same kind of result. But anyway, I'm going to move these out of the way. Okay, again, you're not using edges, you're not using vertices, and none of these should be connected. If they are, something has gone wrong. So you'll notice that, yeah, again, if I go to face or UV shell, I can manipulate this. You'll notice also that it's turned the wrong way, literally. So I'm going to hold down J after hitting E for rotate, and I'm going to rotate this around until it's facing the right direction, which is that. Then I'm going to use scale, and I'm going to scale it up. And I'm going to work with this until I get these UVs, or this UV face or UV shell, in the right spot. Okay, which is to say I don't want the sidebar on there, so I'm going to scale it down, move it this way, scale it down, keep moving it until we get Fruit Loops, you know, right there on the front. And no, this video is not sponsored by Fruit Loops. So there we go. I don't know exactly where that one is supposed to be, but I'm going to guess it's over here based on what I'm seeing. So I'm going to go ahead and move this around until I can scale it, move it and scale it so that it sits where it's supposed to, which I believe is probably about right there. Okay, not exactly exact. There are ways to go about making this a little bit more consistent, and we can go over that at a later time, but right now we're just going to eyeball this until it is in place. And that involves using some of the stitching tools and a couple of other tools that are pretty handy. So, but yeah, you notice also that this is upside down. We already know what the solution for that is. Again, I'm going to scale it out until we get to a better spot, which I think is there-ish. And then I'm going to rotate it holding down J to snap to 180 degrees. And now that's where that belongs. Continue this work until you get everything where you want it to be. I'm just going to quickly do these. Okay, let's say that we wanted to make the texture along the corridor stone or something. We're going to right click here. We're just going to say assign a new material, and we're going to make this Lambert as well. And then we're going to take the name and call it stone wall, like that. So we have stone wall there. And then we're going to go out to the internet and we're going to find something. So I'm just going to say, give me a new window here. And we're going to say stone wall texture. And go to images. And we're just going to take the first thing that comes up. Maybe not. Let's go with this. So we're going to do a save image as. Now, some of these are not for commercial use. If you want to be mindful of that, you can go to tools, you can go to usage rights, and we go to Creative Commons licenses. Will give us a different setup. So let's go ahead and do that just for posterity. I'm going to take this one, go ahead and save that image as, and I'm going to save it in here under shared course files as stone wall JPEG. And you're going to see how this turns out, because okay, so we've got this over here, we've got stone wall, and we're going to do what we did before, which is click on color here. And let's see, what's the duration of our current video? We're 13 minutes in, so this is going to be a longer one. I'm going to click on File, click here, go to Shared Course Files, Materials, and I'm going to go to Stone Wall. Okay, and what you're going to see is that it's a mess. Okay, it's a mess because when we click on this and we go to Material Map Editor, you can see what it did there. Which is kind of ridiculous. So there's a lot of different ways we could handle this. One of them would be to just use the cylindrical map tool, and you can see that we're already improved, albeit not by much. So if I right click here, you can kind of see that that applied in that way. You're going to see a repeating pattern, and ideally when you go into Material Map Editor, the sides of this would repeat. So again, if I'm right-clicking on object mode here and I go to cylindrical, I can go to spherical, or I could go to something like this. None of these are really going to give me kind of an ideal. You can make the argument that this one is actually going to be better, but notice how I get a repeating pattern if I zoom out here, or if I scale up the material. But what you're going to start to see is the repetition in the brick. And that is the key to designing a good repeating texture, is to create a seamless transition from one side to the other, which means, you know, does this one lead into that one, that brick leads into that brick, and so on and so forth. And it looks like they have a little bit of that going on, but you can still sort of see the seams there. But we're in better shape simply by using the planar map, because from the within is where that matters, okay? But there's this stone texture, and you could apply wood to this and so on and so forth, right? So we can go through our different objects. Again, we're going to turn off live object here. But now we have textures applied to our wall as well. And again, we're at 15 minutes on our video, so we're just going to do a quick render. We'll talk about getting some of this lighting calmed down in here by pulling back on some of the intensity. And that's it for textures.